right, you guys. It is the pandemic of 2020, and I've put on some makeup and some clothing, with the exception of the sweatpants I'm wearing right now. And I'm starting a YouTube channel. This is Give Me Some Sugar. My name is Rachel. Oops, I just hit my microphone. This is Give Me Some Sugar. My name is Rachel. I just wanted to do an intro video to tell you about who I am, why you should trust me, and why you should watch my channel. So I did a survey recently in an attempt to figure out where diabetes education is kind of failing people, where people would like to get that information from. And I think a lot of the respondents were people like me. They like to watch YouTube, or we get a lot of our information from social media or visually. So I felt like this channel was needed. I am going to mainly be speaking to type 1 diabetics because I think a lot of the education for type 1 and a lot of the research for type 1 is lacking. However, I do not discriminate against type 2 diabetics. I absolutely invite you to watch my videos, and I'd like to do some type 2 geared videos as well, because I think we do all, while we are very different, we're all very individual. I think we all go through the same struggles mentally, and eventually the complications are the same. So just because we manage things differently and because we have perhaps gotten to the point we've gotten to in a different way, it doesn't mean that we don't all need support in a similar way. That being said, this is a diabetes channel, but I do, I have a bias towards the type 1s because I myself am a type 1 diabetic. I have had type 1 diabetes for 20 plus years now. I was diagnosed when I was about 5 years old. I was on a camping trip, and there's not pretty much a single picture of me without a can of Mountain Dew in my hand. I was super thirsty. I had to pee a bunch, and peeing on a camping trip is not super comfortable. It's a lot of trips to the latrine. And eventually I went to the doctor. My parents took me to the doctor and was diagnosed. I didn't save the date, or I don't really have a lot of data or information on it. I just know that's where I was, and I came out and I was ready to go, live my type 1 life. And I was a pretty independent child. I hated that other people were trying to poke my finger and give me shots. So at a very, very young age, I basically came out of the hospital poking myself and checking myself, and eventually learned to give myself injections as well. This was before pens. It was a time of NPH and regular insulin, but that was largely, I was very independent in that sense because I just hated the way the nurses gave it to me, and I hated the way my parents gave it to me, so I was going to do it myself. So I experienced a really long stint of diabetes burnout. I feel that was largely because of just the culture we have in diabetes, where there's a lot of shame involved, and instead of looking at the numbers and being like, this is data, this is what we can do differently next time, or this is how we can change things and maybe see if the numbers will go in a different direction. So I felt like my blood sugar logs and my A1C, I felt like it was a grade, so I would lie. I would take fake blood sugar logs to the doctor. I would my meter would disappear during those visits as well. I had a doctor call me out at one point because she knew what I was doing, and instead of screening me for anxiety or burnout or distress, she just shamed me instead, and that kind of perpetuated my feelings of fear and anger towards my chronic illness. And so I went a long time. I went to college. I was a music major first. my cello over here. And then during that time in college as well, I was preparing for our broken healthcare system in America, and I knew I would need a job with sure insurance, so I was also working towards being a nurse. And it wasn't until nursing school that I got the awakening of my life, where I started to find out about these complications in diabetes. I started to see patients with those complications, and it was a real thing. Nobody had bothered to tell me about them later on in life because I guess they assumed I had been educated on it at one point, and I never was. So I spent my whole life just knowing that my low blood sugar could kill me and my high blood sugar would kill me. So as long as I just avoided dying, I was good. And it wasn't until nursing school, when I was sitting in those lectures and seeing those patients, that I realized that there are things that, in my opinion, are worse than death. Getting, these renal failure terrifies me, neuropathy, retinopathy, all of these things that could possibly happen to you. And it is possible to kind of not necessarily prevent those complications, but to make the odds better in terms of not developing them. So I was sitting in a high-risk pregnancy class, and I felt like I could never have kids because my A1C was not where I wanted it to be. So that was really depressing. And thankfully, during this time, the first hybrid closed loop came out, the Medtronic 670G, and I was able to be one of the early users of that, and it definitely changed my life in terms of taking the mental burden off of me, as well as bringing my A1C down significantly. I was finally at a 6%. I was like, I felt like pregnancy would be a possibility for me, and that those complications, I did have control over, trying to stave them off and avoid them as much as I possibly could. So then I started my first job as a nurse. I worked on a renal floor, which is kidney failure, whether that's acute or chronic, and it was a lot of type 1, type 2 diabetics with complications, and that was a lot for me mentally to see that. I also met my boyfriend in orientation. He is a type 1 diabetic as well, and he was a big inspiration in getting my numbers in a certain spot. So when I was eating lunch with him one time in orientation, he grabbed a Coca-Cola, just a regular Coke, and some potato chips and just some cookies. And he like laughed at that bolus and was like, here we go.
That wasn't as bad.
And he was, not only was he eating these things that I would not know how to bolus for, he was on MDI, so he was using a long-acting insulin and a short-acting insulin, which in my mind was barbaric. And I asked him, as all diabetics do when they meet each other, just kidding, but I asked him, what his A1C was, and he said it was like a 5.2 or something ridiculous. And that was largely a inspiration for me to get it together, because I was like, if he can do it, then I can do it. So currently I am using a DIY loop, and we can talk about that on this channel, but it is a type of closed loop that works with your pump and your sensor, and it has successfully helped me keep my A1C in the low 5%. So I am finally in a place where I feel like I am able to, possibly have children someday, and that's really exciting, and I'm much less, I feel like I'm a lot more in control. So I want to share my experiences with you. I want to share all the information I know, and I want to help you feel empowered to figure things out and for yourself. Everything I do for myself doesn't work for everyone else, but I want to tell you what the evidence-based research says. I want to tell you maybe some things that have worked for me or have worked for other people, and then you'll have an idea of how to fit that in your life. I would like to talk about adulting specifically. So when we get sent off to college or into our first jobs, there's not a lot of talk about sex, drugs, and alcohol. Or I want to talk a lot about health literacy and financial literacy. So how to budget for your medications, how to navigate this insanely broken healthcare system we have in America as a diabetic who relies on insulin to live. I want to help people understand that and how to kind of work through that, and there are resources you can use to get low-cost insulin and to, fight with your insurance company. However we need to do it, we are going to make sure that you never have to go without your insulin, because that's unacceptable and I'm sick of it. And first and foremost, I want our healthcare system to get their shit together. Second of all, I want you to be safe, and I want you to have what you need to live the healthiest life you possibly can. I would also like to talk a lot about women's health. As a female diabetic, pregnancy is something that requires a lot of practice beforehand. We have these fluctuations in our hormones every month, and that affects our blood sugars significantly, more than I ever thought it would. So I would like to just talk about what to eat during certain times in your cycle, as well as how to move, how to bolus, how to adjust your basal rates, things like that. I think nutrition is a really big one for type 2 and type 1 diabetics. So we'll go over some recipes and meal plans and how to eat in terms of your insulin resistance, among other things. I'm all about balance. So that's kind of what works really well for me, and I find works for the vast majority of people. Why you should trust me. Not only have I been diabetic for a very long time, so I have a lot of personal experience with it. I also work as a registered nurse at an endocrinology clinic, so I try to be very up to date on basically the latest and greatest evidence-based research and how people with diabetes can manage everything they need to manage in the best way possible. I'm currently working toward certified diabetes care and education specialist certification. So it's something I'm very passionate about, and I want to give to everybody, because I know a lot of us don't have access to diabetes education. And so hopefully this can kind of fill some of that gap for you. And then please absolutely send me a message or comment about what you feel like you want to see, what we should talk about. I have a lot of ideas, but I really would like to get some ideas from you as well. We can go over all kinds of stuff. And I would like to also have some interviews too. Zoom interviews, since we can never go outside again. Maybe someday. In this moment of pandemic chaos, we'll just hang out in my office here. It's really great to meet all of you. I'm so excited. Let's have some fun. I'm just gonna warn you, I'm a little dark-humored and a little bit crazy, but like in a good way, so don't be shocked. Alright, I'm gonna start filming a bunch of videos now. You'll probably see this ensemble again soon. Alright, bye.